Coming up on Bridge City News, the Alberta government announced another spending initiative to help parents with childcare. We hear from childcare providers in Lethbridge about what the announcement means for them. And Seattle's new NHL team has decided on a name. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta families will be receiving more help during our province's economic recovery. A new funding agreement between Ottawa and the Alberta government will mean $45 million more for affordable and accessible childcare. Minister of Children's Services Rebecca SHULZ made the announcement earlier today.
This $45 million investment will help make childcare more affordable for children and families in our province who need it most, make childcare more accessible and available all across this province, and support high-quality programming at early learning and childcare centres. I'd like to thank once again Minister Huson and the federal government for working with us to invest in Alberta's working parents, because getting parents back to work truly is a huge part of Alberta's economic recovery plan, a bold, ambitious, long-term strategy to build, diversify, and create jobs.
Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, 109,000 families were enrolled in a licensed or approved childcare space in a centre or day home. Officials say that represents around 30% of Alberta families with kids. The funds are part of a 10-year, $7 billion funding pledge the Trudeau Liberals unveiled 3 years ago. Well, we reached out to a local daycare centre to get reaction to the province's funding announcement. Kingdom Kids Christian Childcare in Lethbridge owner and operator Jennifer Zamet says that each family has specific needs when it comes to funding and assistance.
You have families who, job stability is still uncertain. You have families who don't want to register for care because they don't really know what they need at this point, but they're afraid not to register for care because they don't want to lose the chance of only so many spaces being open. A family that used to be full-time now is going to be part-time, and that makes your finances in general really, really unstable. Wage subsidy is your biggest tool that we've been able to utilize right now. Childcare licensing there was some money that was sort of distributed through there for funding and PPE, and so any sort of resources, grants, anything that we can tap into, we've just tried to navigate. I think the biggest thing is that they're not handing out money on the street corner, right? So you have to really know how to navigate and how to apply for things, because if you're not researching and doing the work yourself, no one's offering it and handing it out, giving you the tools that you need. You really have to self-advocate for those programs.
Zamet also says enrollment for childcare is significantly lower than usual for this time of year, especially leading up to the fall. A group called Citizens for a Better Coaldale is frustrated with the town's council. A new office building called Civic Square is set to be built, and the group feels that there have not been enough consultations with residents. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly has the details.
Since 2018, the town of Coaldale has been looking to revitalize its downtown. As you can see behind me, major construction is being done to revamp sidewalks and roads. As part of the town's revitalization strategy, a civic center is set to be built. The $3.5 million structure hasn't been received well by all, and some are saying there haven't been enough consultations with the public.
The biggest problem is the lack of consultations. This town council it's the most costly town council in Coaldale's history.
Coaldale's mayor, Kim Craig, noted that back in November of 2018, the town's 2019-2021 capital budget was approved by council and accessible via coaldale.ca.
Very public process. We did that in public, and we had open houses and times for people to come in to the town office and look at it.
Members of the Citizens for a Better Coaldale group are questioning the need for a building like this, as well as financial impact. Craig argues that the revitalization strategy in place will boost the town's revenue.
We think we're going to help the local economy be able to cope with the effects of COVID-19 with the stimulus that we're generating.
Is this Taj Mahal of town offices really a necessary need for the town of Coaldale right now?
Conversations with business owners in the area will continue as both parties look to find a common ground. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Cancer has impacted all of us, and when it affects our little ones, it's even more devastating. As Micah Quinn explains now, one family is working diligently on a fundraiser to help out their own little one who is diagnosed with a life-threatening disease.
For the family of Bo Smith, they never could have imagined that their small daughter would be diagnosed with clear cell sarcoma of the kidney.
It was just after her second birthday in December, she started experiencing some stomach pain, and she had an ultrasound and they found a tumor on her kidney. And we started chemotherapy right away. And for 6 weeks she did that. Then they were able to remove the tumor, and then she was diagnosed with clear cell sarcoma, which is a super rare form of kidney cancer.
Smith's sister, Carly Durfee, started a GoFundMe after Bo's diagnosis and had the idea with her sister to make clothes for children that have been affected by cancer.
I was talking to my sister one day and I was like, we should really do something like sell clothes. And it was kind of her idea. And she had always wanted to do something too, to give back to kids with cancer because she received so much help. So we kind of just thought of this together. And so yeah, we just sell shirts and crew necks, and we hope to get more things too.
Bo is currently on week 21 of 35 for chemotherapy and is now in remission.
We just have to finish out the next 15 weeks of chemotherapy, and then hopefully we are done with treatment.
100% of the profits from the clothes will go towards a child with cancer and their family. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Riding bulls will look a little bit different this year for professional bull riders at the NMAC Centre. Instead of being in attendance, the event will be broadcast on the big screen tonight. Fans will attend in their vehicles and will have to social distance from the comfort of their own cars. Jason Davidson is the general manager for PBR Canada, and he says this is an unprecedented time for his industry and company, but that he expects the event to run fairly smoothly.
We know from 19 years experience, we have the best PBR fans in Canada right here in Lethbridge. So we wanted this to be the venue. The city of Lethbridge and the NMAC Centre has just been tremendous hosts with helping us with all the guidelines, following CDC guidelines to make sure this is a healthy and safe environment for our athletes, our personnel, and our stock producers. Yeah, we've worked real hard to be able to bring this experience to the fans of Southern Alberta, and the ones not comfortable with leaving home can catch it on our digital platform, Ride Pass.
The Professional Bull Riders Organization based in Colorado has had events televised since 2012. Now, some sad news coming out of Waterton Lakes National Park today. Parks Canada announced that it had to euthanize a black bear because the bear became too food conditioned and habituated, therefore became a risk to the public. Other bears have also been spotted in the Bowerman Valley in Waterton, and a bear warning has been put out and put in place. Officials at Parks Canada want to remind hikers and campers to not approach nor feed wildlife and to safely store unsecured food and garbage when visiting the park. Calgary's mayor says the province's plan to reopen schools in the fall is not good enough, and the city could step in if it isn't improved. Ned Nenshi says he's nervous about schools returning without mandatory masks when daily infection rates are on the rise. Alberta Health reported another 133 COVID-19 cases, along with 2 additional deaths yesterday. The province has seen more than 100 new cases on 5 of the last 6 days, and infections are now trending upwards. BC's Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, is ordering bars and restaurants to keep patrons seated in groups of no more than 6 and to take measures to reduce lineups. The decision follows a spike in new cases of COVID-19, including 34 announced late yesterday.
That brings our total to 3,362 people in British Columbia. As we all know, the BC COVID-19 curve is trending in a direction we do not want to go, and that is upwards. And we all need to take a step back and look at the things that we need to do to bend our curve back down where we need to keep it. We have proven that we know how to do this, and now each of us needs to do our piece to make that happen.
Meanwhile, in Saskatchewan, the province is reporting 60 new cases of COVID-19, which is the highest single-day increase since the pandemic hit Rider Nation. Health officials say 48 of the new cases are from Hutterite colonies. The Ministry of Health says 17 Hutterite colonies currently have active infections. The province has a total of more than 1,000 cases, including 190 that remain active. The coronavirus pandemic has taken a toll on many of us, not just financially, but spiritually and mentally as well. Psychologist Dr. Greg JANTZ, who wrote the book 5 Keys to Health and Healing, says even during dark times like these, it's important to focus on our blessings and have an attitude of gratitude.
Gratitude begins to change our perspective. Gratitude moves us from being self-absorbed to we begin to see, well, maybe there's others I can be of help. Gratitude begins to create something called optimism. Optimism means I have hope. I'm looking towards the future. So let's create more optimism right now.
Dr. JANTZ will have more on looking at the positive side of life with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up later in our program. A junior men's hockey team in Manitoba has dropped its Indigenous name and mascot. The Nipawa natives announced the change, saying the team would also be dropping its logo of a stereotyped Indigenous man with feathers in his hair. The club will begin the process to decide on a new name and logo. This comes on the heels of other sports teams, including the Edmonton Eskimos of the CFL and Washington Redskins of the NFL, announcing that they too were changing their team names. A decision by Edmonton CFL franchise to drop the Eskimo name has sparked a run on sales of team merchandise with the old team name. Team CEO Chris Presson says increased orders for clothing and other items have come in from fans all across Canada. Presson says fans are viewing the products as collector's items, and the team is likely to continue selling the products until the inventory runs out. The team announced it was dropping the name Eskimos since it was seen as a derogatory term for Inuit. The club also received mounting pressure from sponsors and fans to do the same and drop the name. Seattle has a new NHL team, and as of today, they have a new name and logo. The team will be known as the Seattle Kraken, as in Release the Kraken. The expansion franchise unveiled its nickname today, ending 19 months of speculation. And opting for the sea creature of Scandinavian folklore, Seattle passed on other options such as the Sockeyes, Evergreens, or Metropolitans. Team officials say fans love the name Kraken because it sounds a little edgy and menacing. The primary colors will be deep dark blue and a lighter shade of blue as a complement. Now, there'll be no trademark issues with Kraken, unlike the Las Vegas Golden Knights experienced when they ran into problems with the U.S. Army, and it took several years for the trademark battle to be settled. There are growing calls for Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau to resign in light of his revelation that he and his family went on trips to Kenya and Ecuador in 2017 that were partly paid for by the We Charity. The Conservatives and NDP want Ethics Commissioner Mario Dion to widen his probe.
This was a free trip. We never provided Mr. Morneau with an invoice. Mr. Morneau never sought or inquired to have an invoice, to have those expenses paid, because it was just that. It was a free trip. And in return, we expected to get paid. And boy, did they get paid handsomely, to the tune of nearly $1 billion in hard-earned taxpayers' dollars.
Morneau recently admitted that he repaid We Charity just over $41,000 related to expenses the group covered for the trips. Conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre says the trips violate several sections of the Conflict of Interest Law. As protesters were tear-gassed by federal troops in Portland, Oregon, some Black Lives Matter demonstrators appealed for protesters to stop being so violent.
If white people want to help us, this is not helping us. Now having brown bodies damaged because you guys want to throw water bottles, because you guys want to do whatever, that's not helping us. Put your money in our community. Give our kids social programs. Black Lives Matter, which is me, right? But do you see me out there throwing firecrackers? Do you see me out there throwing things? No. So when the press goes out there and say, "Oh, they're out here rioting," I'm not rioting.
It was on this day that race rioting hits the streets of Detroit, Michigan. Britain's Prince Andrew marries Fergie, and golfer Tiger Woods becomes the youngest golfer to win a Grand Slam. This is Today in History for July 23rd.
July 23rd, 1967.
Black day in July. Motor City madness has touched the countryside.
A week of race-related rioting erupts in Detroit following a police raid on an after-hours club. The violence kills 43 people and injures more than 1,000 others, destroying dozens of homes and businesses. It happens soon after race-related rioting in Newark, New Jersey claims 24 lives. 1885. Former President Ulysses S. Grant dies in Mount McGregor, New York, at the age of 63. Grant led Union forces to victory in the American Civil War before serving in the White House. 1986. Wedding bells for Britain's royal family. Prince Andrew marries Sarah Ferguson, better known as Fergie, in London's Westminster Abbey. The couple divorces a decade later. 1984. Vanessa Williams, the first black Miss America, also becomes the first to give up her crown. Williams relinquishes her title after nude photographs of her taken years earlier are published in Penthouse magazine. And 2000.
When I turned pro, I felt that I would contend in a number of major championships. Now, would I win them is a different story.
Tiger Woods becomes the youngest golfer to complete a career Grand Slam, winning the British Open at age 24. Today in history, July 23rd. Ed Donahue, The Associated Press.
It was 65 years ago that Bibles were brought to persecuted Christians in Eastern Europe through Open Doors. The organization founded by Brother Andrew has since changed its scope and methods, but as we hear in this next report, the mission has never changed, which is reaching people for Christ.
As persecution watchdog, Open Doors reached the remarkable milestone of celebrating its 65th anniversary this month. The organisation says it's vital more than ever before to stand up for persecuted Christians around the world. Dr. Ronald Boyd McMillan, who oversees global strategy and research for Open Doors International, looks back on how their founder, Brother Andrew, inspired so many others to carry on the mantle of this great ministry after reading his famous book, God's Smuggler.
He knew that his vision was too big to be accomplished by himself. So God brought people alongside him to build an organization. And really, Open Doors is the size it is today. It is really the largest organization that assists the persecuted church around the world. And that's really because a whole generation kind of read God's Smuggler in the 1970s and said, I want to have that adventure too.
Dr. Boyd McMillan went on to explain how Open Doors has transitioned from smuggling Bibles across the Iron Curtain to helping those today who face persecution primarily through radical Islam.
If you're helping, say, for example, someone who's become a believer from a Muslim background, the sources of persecution are much more diffuse. So it might be their family, it might be their tribe, it might be their neighborhood. It's not often, in a sense, the state to the same extent, but it's harder. And so it means that in Open Doors, as we strengthen those particular types of believers, it's not just giving them a Bible anymore. It might be giving them a micro loan in order to start a business, because once they leave the faith, they leave the family.
He concluded by sharing how Open Doors will continue to support Christians who are reaching out to Muslims, like in Syria.
Even talking to a Baptist minister, I remember a few years ago, about 6 months ago, in Aleppo, he said, I've had to tell the Christians not to come to church on Sunday. This is before COVID. And I said, oh, that's a shame. He said, no, it's not a shame. He said, I don't want them taking away a seat in the church from a Muslim inquirer.
Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
We had some light showers in some areas of southwestern Alberta today, which gave us a little bit of humidity, and the hot temperatures should remain for quite some time. Complete weather details are on deck. We had some sun mixed with cloud and even some light showers in parts of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, many of the clouds should clear out, and it should be a great time to get away to the mountains or maybe even the lake this weekend.
Yeah, Hal, that is for sure, and I definitely live for the weekends this time of year, especially when it's been as hot as it has been. And you are right, we could see a chance of showers tonight. We just got to get through tonight. Possibility of a thunderstorm this evening as well. 30% chance of showers tonight with some wind gusts up to 50 kilometers per hour. The overnight low tonight, 16 degrees, and then into tomorrow, we're going to see a high of 27 degrees. And look at all that sunshine coming back at us tomorrow for our Friday. Also could see some wind as well with a southwesterly wind gusting to 50k at times. Overnight low tomorrow evening, 8 degrees. And then as we look into the weekend, we're going to be seeing lots of sunshine and beautiful temperatures as well. As you were mentioning, we should definitely all of us get away to the lakes, get away to the mountains, and just have a great time. 24 degrees is the high for Saturday, 26 expected for Sunday. And then look at that. We're going to climb right up into the 30s early next week. 30 degrees on Monday, up to 33 on Tuesday, and 31 degrees is expected to be our high for next Wednesday. Lots of sunshine in the forecast over the next 5 days, which is lovely. Now, according to the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 degrees, so we're definitely reaching higher than that. Average low 11, 38 degrees was our high temperature. That was back in 2003, and the chilliest one on record was 5 degrees. That was in 1982. Our sun woke up this morning at 5:50 a.m. 1 minute later rather than it did yesterday, and our evening sunset tonight 9:25 p.m. Now let's take a look at what's happening across the country for our highs for tomorrow. Starting on the west coast, mix of sun and cloud is expected tomorrow in Victoria with a high of 21 degrees. 21 also expected in Vancouver, but they could see a chance of showers. Now over in Edmonton and Calgary tomorrow, 60% chance of showers for both of those cities, high of 20 degrees. Could see some wind as well in Calgary and a risk of some thunderstorms for both of those cities. Now Saskatoon under a heat warning at 28 degrees, could feel a lot hotter with the humidex. 29 is expected to be the high in Regina under lots of sunshine. Winnipeg 33 degrees. They could see a chance of a thunderstorm as well. Now tons of sunshine over here in the Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal area. 29 degrees and 27 in Toronto expected there. So a beautiful, lovely day. Drink plenty of water. It's going to be hot. Stay in the shade. Now as we get further into Atlantic Canada, this is where we see a lot more rain happening. Fredericton's high 26 degrees, 24 over in Charlottetown. They could see a possibility of some thunderstorms beginning in the morning. Halifax, same thing, 25 is their high. Chance of rain, possibility of some thunderstorms. Now over in St. John's, Newfoundland tomorrow, their high is 15 degrees, but they're going to be seeing quite a bit of rain beginning early in the morning and then throughout the day. 10 to 20 millimeters of rain is expected there in St. John's tomorrow. So there you go. That is your forecast.
Today's weather highlights are brought to you by Gym in the North, top-notch equipment and customized classes in Lethbridge's North End.
Loblaw says its second quarter profit fell 41% from last year as a temporary pay boost for employees and COVID-related safety measures pushed up costs. Canada's largest grocer says its earnings fell to $169 million, while adjusted profits came in at $266 million, or 74 cents per share. That beats analyst expectations of 71 cents. Loblaw says the higher cost offset a 7.4% increase in revenue to nearly $12 billion. Cenovus Energy is reporting a $235 million loss in the second quarter, compared with a close to $1.8 billion profit from a year earlier. The oil sands company says weak crude oil prices contributed to a 61% plunge in revenue to $2.17 billion. The decline in revenue came despite an increase in total production of around 30,000 barrels per day compared with last year. Cenovus says it quickly ramped up production when Western Canadian Select prices increased almost tenfold in June from prices in April. Precision Drilling says its second quarter loss widened to $48.9 million. That is 3.5 times higher than a year ago. The Calgary-based company says its revenues plummeted 47% to just under $190 million as the COVID-19 pandemic caused demand and prices for oil to dwindle. Precision says deeper cost-cutting and the Canadian wage subsidy will help reduce 2020 cash outflows by up to $150 million. That is above its previous target of $100 million. Microsoft says the coronavirus pandemic has increased demand for its flagship cloud computing and workplace productivity products. The company reported quarterly earnings that beat Wall Street expectations. Fiscal fourth quarter profit was up $11.2 billion, or $1.46 per share. Analysts were expecting $1.34 per share. It posted revenue of $38 billion in the April to June period, which was up 13% over last year. Other parts of the business, however, including LinkedIn, were hurt by a weak job market and less money spent on advertising. As the novel coronavirus hit businesses hard around the world, small business owners are coming up with new ways to stay afloat. Here is just one example.
PCM on a harsh shift concern.
When the pandemic first hit, we got together a team of 7 people. It was 6 people on site, and then Rhonda was on the team as well. And we set a goal for ourselves that we wanted to make sure that we were able to keep everybody employed through the pandemic. The benefits we saw during the COVID-19 response to having Rhonda not on site with us that I can think of revolved around, first of all, she's not, when you're in a retail environment, you're always interacting with customers that need a service, and the level of service they needed was different because now we're doing a lot of picking up and delivering of vehicles and that type of thing. So those types of things kind of consume your day, where Rhonda being off-site could focus on some of the behind-the-scenes things that needed to be done, the policies that needed to be drafted, and some of the research on what we needed for equipment and cleaning supplies and those types of things.
I think in the beginning, I was really excited that people were going to be more inclined to go virtual, and I've seen a lot of people around me losing their jobs and getting laid off, but I think that will start moving more toward virtual in a lot of ways. It was a little scary, I'll be honest. In the beginning, I thought, the contractors are generally the first to go so they can keep their employees. But thankfully, Renard's worked really hard to make sure that everybody stayed on.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 152 points on the day to finish at 16,018. The Dow was down 353 points on the day to 26,652. The S&P 500 was down 40 points to 3235, and the Nasdaq was down 244 points on the day to 10,461. Oil was down 84 cents to 41.06 per barrel. Natural gas was up 10 cents to $1.78. Gold was up 3 cents to $18.8748 an ounce, and silver was up a cent to $22.60 an ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton. Barley's at $247. Canola's at $483. And corn is at $233 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 65 cents to $102.40. Feeder cattle were up 50 cents to $143.08, and lean hogs were up $1.83 to $54.95. The Canadian dollar was unchanged on the day at $74.58 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta families will be receiving more help during our province's economic recovery. A new funding agreement between Ottawa and the Alberta government will mean $45 million more for affordable and accessible childcare. Minister of Children's Services Rebecca SHULZ made the announcement earlier today. So how can we improve our mental health during the coronavirus pandemic? Psychologist Dr. Greg JANTZ has some tips for us next during an interview with BCN's Jeanette Rocher.
As the COVID-19 pandemic continues to wreak havoc around the world, many are grappling with loneliness, anxiety, and depression. It seems like we've lost control and perhaps we've lost a little hope. Today's guest has some timely advice and encouragement. Dr. Greg JANTZ is a psychologist and author and founder of the Center, a Place of Hope, one of the top facilities for treatment of depression in the U.S. His latest book is 5 Keys to Health and Healing. Dr. Greg JANTZ, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, such an important topic, and good to be with you today.
Awesome. So your book starts out by saying everyone struggles with challenges in life, but we all need hope. Why is hope so vital to our health?
Well, you take this panic pandemic we've been in. I'm calling it a panic pandemic, but now we've got to shift and look at this pandemic with a purpose. And the purpose has got to be, we've got to reset some things in our life. And so what I talk about, and we work with folks who come in from all over to work on anxiety and depression. And the reason being is we've reached an emotional saturation point. People have reached their limit. They're on this edge of despair. And so today our topic of hope, and hope comes when you have a plan. Today we want to help begin to create a plan for hope.
Yeah, exactly. Now, why is it that we tend to worry so much? And how can we learn to control our thought life?
Yeah, how about that? We have a lot to worry about right now, too. It's where we put our point of focus. Some of us learn to be really good worriers. And so you have a pandemic, you have a lot to worry about. And we can keep layering our life with worry, which will take us to anxiety. By the way, if you have anxiety, if you have physical symptoms. So I got sweaty palms, my heart rate's up, shortness of breath, digestive, aches and pains, you've got anxiety. So I can take worry and turn it into anxiety, but I need to stop and hit that pause button today and go, okay, what do I really need to change? Well, one of the things we've got to change is how we think. And we need to learn, what's it mean to renew our thinking? What's it mean to begin to put the truth in? Because worry and anxiety, it distorts reality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going through that right now too, especially with everything that's going on. Yeah. Now, you suggest in your book that gratitude or a thankful heart is actually an antidote for toxic thinking. How so?
Yes, gratitude. What an interesting word at this time. You go, I don't have much to be thankful for. And we get into that thinking mode. What if, just what if the next 30 days you decided, I'm going to live a little differently. I'm going to start my day with 3 gratitudes. 3 gratitudes. I'm going to write down, I'm going to create a gratitude journal. Here you go. I'm going to start today. I'm going to write down my 3 gratitudes every day. And just maybe it's something really simple, which is usually the best gratitudes. But notice over time that gratitude begins to change our perspective. Gratitude moves us from being self-absorbed to we begin to see, well, maybe there's others I can be of help. Gratitude begins to create something called optimism. Optimism means I have hope. I'm looking towards the future. So let's create more optimism right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's so easy to allow those negative emotions to take control. So, I mean, like anger and fear, right? So you refer in your book to anger, fear, and guilt as an emotionally toxic trinity. Can you explain?
Oh, yes. Anger, I call them the 3 deadly emotions. Anger, fear, and guilt. Anger, another word for anger could be hurt. Another word for anger could be frustration. Hey, by the way, we have a lot to possibly be angry and frustrated with right now. But as we start looking and going, okay, am I going to be ruled by anger and hurt? Maybe I need to figure out some forgiveness here. So there's anger. If I'm going to be healthy, I've got to learn how to deal with anger and frustration. The next one's fear, worry, anxiety. Fear is the great paralyzer. Fear keeps us in a place of paralyzation. We don't take much action. We're afraid. We hold inward. That's fear. And then there's guilt. Guilt can be usually shame. I feel like I'm defective. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. So we've got to figure out, to be emotionally healthy, anger, fear, and guilt.
Wow. Now, during this COVID-19 pandemic, so many have had to live in isolation, unfortunately. Now, how does this impact our health and wellness?
Yeah. So we take quarantine, and I'm doing this because quarantine holds you in, confinement, and we mix this with it's too long. Quarantine that lasts too long ends up creating more and more anxiety and depression. So really, what we're preparing for is we have a mental health pandemic. We're going to have more mental health issues emerging as they are already than ever before. And so we want to be prepared to deal with this. We want to be prepared to really deal with the anxiety and depression. It's going to be, I think we could say right now, anxiety is an epidemic. Who don't you know who's struggling with some anxiety and everything that's going on? So that's why, my mission is, and our mission here at the Center, A Place of Hope, is to change lives for good, to equip you with God's help. We don't know exact outcomes, but we know that we can change our perspective. We're going to use this as a time to reset. Reset means, okay, I don't like what I'm in, but I'm going to grow. It's going to be a pandemic with a purpose for me. I'm not going to be defeated by this.
Wow. This isolation reduces the opportunity to maintain our relationships too. Now, in your book, you talk about the importance and the qualities of good relationships.
Yes. So relationships. So if we're isolated, maybe many of our relationships have been digital. Oh boy. And we've been over digitalized. Yeah, our relationships. And here's the issue. It's okay as an emergency provision to be able to have all the ways we can communicate digitally, but you know what? We need one another. And we're designed for touch, we're designed for hugs, we're designed for in-person interactions. And so let's remember the importance of that. It really is important. So as we emerge, reintegrate from all this, we need to remember real life relationships are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, speaking of relationships, you believe that it's important to have an accountability partner. So what exactly does this mean?
Well, if we're going to keep growing, and you know, we've come through a mode where we've been shocked and traumatized by everything, and things felt like out of our control, and now we're moving into this growth mode. It's a mode that says, well, in order to keep growing, I need accountability. I just can't say, hey, I'm going to go out and do my 20-minute walk a couple times a day. Well, who are you holding that standard with? So we all need one another.
Yeah, it helps us to stay on track, doesn't it, right? Yeah, 100%. Now, you mentioned a daily walk. So you're a psychologist, not a fitness trainer, obviously, but you say that physical fitness is very important to maintain emotional health. Makes sense.
Oh, we've got to keep the movement up. Movement is so important. Movement and water. Have your water, okay? And one of the things, when we get full of anxiety, we tend not to drink our water. We tend to drink other things. So keep water up, keep movement up. The difference over time, it's just not one time. The difference over time will make a big difference.
I'm so glad now they have those flavored waters too, because water's not my favorite. It definitely helps me get the water
Come on,
in.
let's have your water today.
Good advice. Now, I wonder how many people will continue to isolate even after the restrictions are lifted, simply out of fear. What's your advice on this?
Don't let fear keep you paralyzed. Fear distorts reality. And maybe you need to test the waters. But we have been conditioned during this period to feel fear. There's the fear of the what if. So what if? What if this virus comes back? What if? And so we have all these potential what ifs that can create fear. So just as fear is kind of contagious. If we're afraid, you know, we all kind of run together. Remember, courageousness is contagious. So let's be courageous. Let's create a positive direction. Now, I don't mean that's super easy to do, but we can do this together. Let's be courageous.
Yeah, sounds great. It's just hard to practice sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, sure.
Now, in your book, you talked about the fact that God is in control, even while so much of our lives are out of control these days, especially. So how can we learn to actually embrace this and be at peace with that?
Yeah. Here's what we need to know. It's a real test of faith. You know, I'm going to decide fear or faith. And I got to keep deciding on this faith side. But one of the things is we're going to see, and I've seen it personally, we're going to see, wow, through all this, through this sheltering, God has been my shelter. God has been my shelter. And I'm growing through this. And every time in biblical history that God has sheltered someone and people have been sheltered, there's been a victory. So let's be on the victory outlook, shall we?
Yeah, good idea. Now, is it possible that God sometimes allows us to face uncertainty so that we learn to build our faith and trust in Him?
Yeah, that's why I say, well, how about this? Pandemic with a purpose. The purpose is I'm walking through some things that may be extremely stressful, may be really rough. I'm walking through those. Let's keep it up.
Good advice, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. JANTZ. It was such a pleasure to have you on our show.
Nice to be with you today, and let's just say it, there is hope.
Exactly. That is Dr. Greg Jantz. He is the author of 5 Keys to Health and Healing, available at aplaceofhope.com.
Throughout generations, people have probed the Holy Scriptures in search of meaning, purpose, solace, and forgiveness. It's also the ultimate source of timeless leadership principles. Joining me now to talk about it is Joe Turnham, the Economic Development Director for East Alabama, also author of the book Leading from Our Knees. Joe, welcome to Bridge City News.
It's great to be with you, Hal.
Now, do you think our recent challenges in both your country, in the U.S., and here in Canada have caused us to really look at leadership a little bit differently?
Without question. And I think, most people think successful leadership breeds peace and tranquility, but often it doesn't. And I think leading amidst chaos and destruction and pandemic and economic calamity is probably one of the greatest challenges of leadership. And I think it rattles the faith of those who count on their leaders to solve problems. And many times these problems are beyond the scope of simple solutions. And that's when we measure leadership with a little different yardstick, as you would say.
Or here in Canada, meter stick, that's right. Now, do we expect a little too much from those who lead us? Our mayors, our premiers, governors, like south of the border? What do you think?
Hal, I don't think we expect too much of them. I do think that perhaps we are maybe overconfident or over demanding in what we think the results can be from leadership. We talk about in the book a little bit that many times leadership is not making a good or a bad choice, but making the lesser choices that hurt the fewest or perhaps give us a chance for hope. And I think in these days that we have to allow leaders to make a few mistakes, because they will make mistakes, and many times they're making important measurements of do we reopen society at a risk of increasing infections, or do we let people lose jobs or get people sick? And these are not easy decisions for leaders. And I think that people sometimes can get cruel and partisan when leaders don't make decisions that they totally agree with, when in fact, if we're constituents of faith, that's when we need to ramp up prayers, and we need to hope that our leaders are getting good advice. In the scripture, leaders and kings and judges, they relied on prophets and advisors, and so I think that we have to look for our leaders to be getting the best advice that they can get in these days.
Joe, as the Economic Development Director for East Alabama, what have you seen in your present or past work with pastors, heads of state, or community leaders?
Well, that every leadership situation sometimes is situational. And I think a lot of leaders are in situations they've never been in before. I mean, in economic development, we have massive job losses. We have things are getting personal. Places with very high economic standards, people are going to food banks. So you have to recalculate. I think you look more internally. No person is left behind. You have to kind of recalibrate how you make decisions and how you prioritize decisions. I know economic developers are looking to, sometimes instead of recruiting, we have to rescue. And I think that's been a big focus. And I think as pastors or leaders of faith, we have to look at maybe not giving the solutions, but giving hope and getting in the right direction, the right frame of mind, so that we can come out the other end of this situation that we're in.
Hey, Joe, sometimes there are no right answers to complex challenges. How do effective leaders really navigate times of uncertainty?
Well, I think that good leaders exemplify humility, that sometimes the issues are beyond them. They reach out for help. They admit mistakes. They're able to change direction. There's nothing wrong in leadership with changing directions. If a policy or perhaps the situations change, leaders can change. And I think asking those that follow you, whether you're an elected official or whether you're just a community leader, that, hey, we need to recalibrate today. We need to change directions. Maybe we got the data wrong. I think those are the kinds of changes that people appreciate leaders making in these days.
Biblical leaders were far from perfect, Joe. We all know that. Why does God often choose people who seem the least likely people to lead?
Well, it's throughout the scriptures. I mean, you look at, whether people were grinding grain or whether they were fishermen or whether they were tending sheep. I mean, God plucked out people of really modest means that never went to leadership school. And the leaders of today, sometimes their job is not to lead for a long time, but to lead through a certain situation. And I think leaders make mistakes. I mean, David was a man after the heart of God, but he numbered Israel, he committed adultery, he was an accessory even to murder, but he became a man after God's own heart. And the brothers of Joseph sold him into slavery and deprived their own flesh and blood of opportunity. And in the end, Joseph, when he's dying, looks around, he said, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." So, I think leaders today, we need to pray for them, but I think also we need to allow good leaders to make some mistakes.
So in your opinion, then, what are some of the core attributes that make for a good leader?
Humility. Always look for humility. I think in leaders that have a heart of love and service, and you can discern that in the way that they conduct themselves. And we say here in the Deep South, where I'm from, that we want leaders that will be cross bearers and not crown wearers. That people that seek to do leadership because they know it's a duty, a lift. It oftentimes brings you under scrutiny and burdens. People that run for office or people that want the trappings of success or influence or that need the affirmation of power are usually people that I know will not last or be effective leaders. But a good thing is always humility and people that even have a sense of humor, that are able to be self-deprecating, because I think in leadership that it will overwhelm anyone. It doesn't matter if you're leading at the local or the national level. And I think that leaders also that seek the right advice, and leaders that have that heart for service. And I think it bleeds through everything they do and say.
You talk about being from the Deep South. I can hear that strong Southern accent. When I speak with you, can you hear my strong Canadian accent?
I can. It's very beautiful.
Okay. Why do you feel a real kinship with many of the characters and situations in the Bible?
I have been a political candidate. I've won some races, lost some races. I have been on the edge of disaster. I have met kings, queens, leaders, presidents over many administrations, and have been almost driven to my knees and in trying to understand leadership. And the Holy Spirit spoke to me to write this particular book because I think leadership is lonely. Leadership can destroy families. I've seen many people get destroyed financially, legally, and otherwise being in leadership. And so I felt like God wanted me to take these lessons of Scripture and offer them to people, because we're all leaders, and if we're people of faith, God will call us to leadership. Jonah didn't want to judge the people. Are you going to go to Nineveh or Tarshish? He didn't want to go in the right direction, but if you're a person of faith and God calls you to lead, he will pursue you until you answer that call. So, I think all of us at some point in faith will be called, whether it's to lead in our own families, which is the greatest leadership calling of anyone, to leading at in a network in Canada, or leading, a group of scouts. I mean, I think leadership, we're all blips of eternity. And I think, every action that we do will be measured in the fire of heaven. And I think that when we do things in the right heart and the right mind, and we love each other and we seek forgiveness, and I think in the United States today, we're seeking to understand. Daniel in the Old Testament set his heart to understand. And I think that leaders today, whether and you ask me a quality of a great leader, is leaders that want to understand and hear the opposing voices, and bring people to the banquet that have never sat there and hear their perspective. And I think for us to heal, especially in America in these days, love, listening, learning, humility, finding places of where we can agree and de-escalate. That's when I think the Holy Spirit begins to work through situations.
Now, in each of your 365 entries, you provide a verse from the Bible and a takeaway lesson. Can you maybe cite an example or two?
Sure. I mean, the title of the book, Leading from Our Knees, is actually from the book of Luke, and it's Christ setting the example of leadership. And it was Christ went into a mountain one night to pray, and it says he prayed all night. And when he descended from the mountain, he chose his 12 apostles. Big decision he had to make. Son of God, creator of heaven and earth. What does he do? He prays over his decisions, and I think that's a big takeaway. And you know, the book is a read through scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, and we can see from the prophets and the prophetesses and the disciples and apostles, but Christ himself. He knew when to cleanse the temple and when to be quiet in front of a Pilate. And he can show us in our leadership journeys today how to lead a holy life and a holy leadership journey.
Jesus provided the best example of leadership, Joe. What do you see as some of the qualities that Jesus had and demonstrated that we rarely see in our leaders today?
Well, Jesus knew what his mission was, and he knew that that was going to be a lonely leadership journey. He knew he was going to be tempted. Leaders are tempted, and you know he went to the temple. Satan probably didn't offer him. Satan probably said, "There'll be no more plagues. There'll be no more death. There'll be no more tears if you follow me." And in Christ, that was a hard decision, but he quoted the scriptures. He knew the scriptures, and I think Christ also he loved people into the fold, but he also knew that leadership. There's nothing wrong with telling people of faith that there will be suffering in your journey. You know, I mean. I also believe in prosperity and that people of faith can be rewarded by following the word of God. But if we are called to leadership, we will suffer. And Christ was a suffering servant. And I think that, you know, I have not seen nor ear heard, nor has ever entered into the heart of any man the things that God has prepared for those that love him. And I think that if we as people of faith in this earthly journey and this leadership journey that many of us are given, if we will keep our eyes on the eternal prize, and that if we will love others as we love ourselves, and we forgive 7 times 7, and that God will lift us up and he will use us in the things that we do, and Christ is the perfect example of that.
Joe, can a person be a good leader and yet be an unbeliever?
Absolutely. And you know, I think that there's certain principles of leadership. I mean, you don't have to be a person of faith necessarily to be humble or to be caring or to love. But we also understand that the kings and queens and princes and presidents are but the footstool of God. And many times, you know, we leaders think that they're affecting the outcome of eternity, but you know, God orders the steps. I think he orders the steps of the faithful. I think he orders the steps of unbelievers. He's the God of all circumstances. So, yeah, sure. I think that anyone is used in leadership, and people can have the right heart, not necessarily know the heart of God.
So what advice would you offer parents about their own role in leadership within their families?
Be available. Listen, find times to put the electronics down, to do the simple things, to take out grandma's recipe. I think, you know, in the quarantine here in the United States, I feel that it was God's gift to us to have to spend time with families. We're not on planes, trains, automobiles. We're forced to be together. You know, that teenager that we can't have a discussion with, there are times that God's opened the door to have that walking down the street, or perhaps pierce the heart of a relative that is astray. And so, you know, let's look at the tough times that we faced with the pandemic as almost opportunities. And I really believe even here in North America, where we're having great social disturbance, that it could be a setup for you know, a huge spiritual awakening in our country, where love and forgiveness and understanding and a search for justice and mercy prevail all that we do. Just as the genocide in Rwanda forced people, Hutus and Tutsis, to sit down and to understand, how can this happen? How can we heal? How can we confess? How can we make it better? And, you know, sometimes a setback is a setup for God to work great miracles.
So how do you hope readers will use your book, Leading from Our Knees, and what kind of takeaways will there be for non-leaders?
Well, I think they're timeless principles. You know, you can read the Christian texts, and they, you know, they're about, you know, love and being accountable, and there are a lot of great principles there, just as there are in many faiths, in Buddhism and Islam and other religions. But I think if you look at it, that you will see that many of timeless principles that many generations have seen from great leaders are really in the Old and New Testaments of the Judeo-Christian texts.
Joe Turnham, author of the book, Leading from Our Knees, thanks a lot for your time today.
Thank you, Hal. God bless.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.